Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 53, recorded April 2021. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where we speak with Star Trek fans, and we try to figure out why we love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 53. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. Spoiler warning, as we recorded this, we were done with Discovery Season 3, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, humans. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the generally gallant, gloriously geeky, yet never ghastly M5 Multitronic unit. Say hello, M5.
The M5 greets you.
Show me the announcements.
Announcements displayed.
The Trek Profiles Podcast is an independent show. If you'd like to support us, the best way for you to do that is to follow us wherever you get your audio. We are on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. After the ending audio cards, there are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material. You can enjoy it or not, as you choose. Every guest on this show faces the Kobayashi Maru lightning round of 5 multiple-choice questions at the end of each interview. And after each episode drops, I tweet those out as Twitter polls. So let's review the results from Episode 50 with Alex Shoemaker. Question 1, Beardy Spock or no Beardy Spock? Both Alex and the Twitter people selected Beardy Spock, with the poll winning by 56 to 44%. Would you rather have Geordi's red pad with the buttons or Crusher's blue lab coat with pockets? Alex picked the blue lab coat, but the Twitter poll was a very rare 50-50 tie. Survival situation. Which inhospitable climate are you better able to navigate? The Vulcan's Forge or the Andorian Northern Wastes? Both Alex and the Twitter respondents were apparently desert people and selected the Vulcan's Forge by 62 to 38%. Going in a battle Klingon style, choose your bladed weapon, Batleth or Mek'leth. Alex picked the Mek'leth, but once again the Twitter poll was a 50-50 tie. Very strange. And finally, which Romulan device is better, the plasma weapon or the cloaking device? Both Alex and the Twitter people selected the cloak, and in this case it was 100% for the cloak. No love for the plasma weapon at all. C'est la vie. And that's it for that. Let's get to it. M5, roll it.
Interview loading.
Her favorite characters are Spock and Lwaxana Troi. She also likes Shran and even the Vulcans too. She's a brand new shiny Star Trek fan since only December 2020. What the what? She's from that very special place, New York City, North America, Earth, in Sector 001. It's Alexandria Elnadouri. Welcome, Alex, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Alex, are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes, I am.
And is it in fact true what I said in the introduction that you have only been a fan since December 2020?
Yeah, it's only been a few months, but I feel like I've been in the fandom for more than that.
Oh, now you got to explain this to me. So you grew up here in New York, I imagine?
Yes.
Okay. And growing up like in the United States, you have to be aware that there's a thing out there called Star Trek, even if you didn't watch it or care about it, right?
Yes, I've seen Star Trek all over TV, advertisements for it. It's been all over my Netflix suggested to watch, but in my household, we never really watched Star Trek. My household was more of a Star Wars household, so I grew up with that. But I've always wanted to start it, but it's always been intimidating because I'm like, why are there 5 different Star Treks? I don't understand the difference between them. And I just never thought to look into it on my own.
So then take me back to that moment. I guess it was in 2020 sometime. If not, you can correct me. Where you decided to suddenly take the plunge. What happened to make you want to sit down and actually watch it?
So I really like to play Dungeons and Dragons, and due to COVID, we had to stop meeting in person, but a few of us still wanted to play online. The rest of my group didn't want to, but the 3 of us, we did want to. So one guy, he offered to be the Dungeon Master, and he wanted to do a Star Trek version called Star Trek Online, or no, Star Trek Adventures. And I
Okay.
said, okay, I don't know anything about Star Trek, but I do want to continue playing Dungeons and Dragons, so just tell me where to start. And he gave me this whole list of episodes, just bare bones to watch to understand how to play the game, but I didn't watch the bare bones list. I just started watching everything.
So you with your D&D group, you started playing Star Trek Adventures. He gave you the bare bones list, and you're like, "To heck with this! I'm going to start watching everything." So when you sat down to start watching, did you start watching before you started playing, or at the same time, or after? How did that work?
Before, a few weeks before. I think it was maybe a month before he gave us the list, and I was procrastinating a little bit the first week, and then I started with the original series, and I'm like, oh, this is old, but this is really nice. It reminds me of the Twilight Zone. And I just kept watching, and he goes, oh, are you on to the next generation yet? I said, no, I'm actually on season 3 of the original series. He's like, well, you got to hurry up because you're not going to understand some key plot points.
Perfect. So you started watching original series, and then you started playing the game. Did you continue just right on into TNG and just watch it all like sequentially, season by season in order?
Yes, I'm currently on season 4 of The Next Generation. I haven't finished it yet. I've only watched a handful of episodes of Deep Space Nine, none of Voyager, none of Discovery, but I did watch all of Enterprise.
Oh, okay. So how did you wait a minute. So how did you decide to launch an Enterprise? What happened there? How did that work?
I like The Next Generation. I don't dislike it, but sometimes it gets so serious, and I just needed a break from that. So I decided to start Enterprise because I knew there was more Vulcan representation in that show, and that's what I was kind of missing from The Next Generation. So I started watching Enterprise, and not that I like it more, it just felt more comfortable, and it felt less strict. It felt less structured, like less Starfleet structure, so to speak, because they're still trying to figure out everything. Their first time stepping into space. So I just binged all of Enterprise in, I think, 2.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So you've got all of TOS, all of Enterprise. You're you're in the middle of Next Gen.
Yeah.
Just a handful of Deep Space Nine episodes.
Oh, and I have watched all of Lower Decks 2 times.
And Lower Decks. Now, I will tell you this. There are some deep cuts to a lot of things that are in a lot of different episodes from Lower Decks. I mean, I couldn't catch all the stuff.
I'm sure there's still a lot I don't understand because I haven't watched Voyager. I haven't watched most of Deep Space Nine. But the reason why I watched it 2 times is because I started introducing other people to Lower Decks. They may not necessarily want to watch Star Trek, but I know they like cartoons and I know they like outrageous things that happens in Lower Decks. So I started watching it with them, and they definitely did not understand any of the most basic little tidbits from bringing it from the show.
Gotcha. So are you going to commit right here and now, Alex? Because I'm putting you on the spot. Are you going to commit to watching it all at some point?
Oh, absolutely. It's just taking me a little longer than I anticipated.
What's your timeline for this? When are we going to award you the completionist badge?
I would like to say the end of the year.
All right. And that includes all the new stuff on Paramount Plus and all the Discovery, Picard, all that. Mm-hmm. Very exciting. They're pretty different shows, I can tell you that for sure. So it sounds from your story that this is something you're doing solo. This is not like a family activity, or you're watching with siblings or your partner or something else.
Yeah, no, I'm watching this all on my own. My boyfriend, he's actually playing the game with us. He was a Star Trek fan his whole childhood, and for some reason he never thought to say, "Hey, Alex, you ever want to watch Star Trek sometime? I think you'd really enjoy it." And he was surprised that I did like it as much as I did. And he goes, man, I should have introduced this to you 3 years ago, not wait until we playing a Dungeons and Dragons game. So he hasn't watched all of it. I think he's watching Discovery and Voyager right now, but he's watched all of the original series, Next Generation, Lower Decks as well.
So did you tell him that you're going to go on a podcast talking about being a Star Trek fan?
Yeah, he was actually kind of jealous.
I will take that as a mission accomplished right here. So I want to hear a little bit about your Star Trek Adventures game. What's the setting? What's going on in Star Trek Adventures? What's the scenario that you've been presented with? And I want to know about your character too.
Okay, so you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, how there's you go session by session, you leave off at a certain point. So we do the same thing, but the way that our game can pretty much go indefinitely until nobody wants to play anymore. We play by episodes. So there'll be an episode where there's this whole plot going on, and we have to go from beginning to end, like it would in the show. And we finished one episode so far. We're on our second one right now, and our DM, he's like in love with everything that we've done. We've gone beyond his expectations. He's really happy. He's really happy with everything we've done, especially since some of us are new fans.
Well, tell me about your character.
So I really enjoy Vulcan, so of course I had to pick a Vulcan science officer. Really inspired by Spock because I love everything that he does, and I just wanted to put that into my own character. I did make a secondary character that's also a science officer, but I haven't really played him yet. He's a Xindi primate science senior officer.
Alex, which era are you playing in your adventures? Is it sort of TOS era, TNG era, something after that?
TNG Deep Space Nine, because we started off in Quark's bar. That's how like the whole episode 1 started. That's where we all met each other.
Oh, I see. So it's not you're all on a ship together going somewhere. It was more of a space station.
All freshly recruited ensigns about to be assigned to our first mission.
Oh, so you're doing basically your own version of Lower Decks in Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah, basically.
Excellent. Well, that sounds exciting.
I didn't start watching Lower Decks until our first episode was almost over, and then I got inspired. I'm like, oh my god, this is literally what our campaign feels like. It's not as chaotic as Lower Decks, but it definitely has that flair of just ridiculous things happening with the same seriousness that you would get from the Next Generation.
Oh, that's great. And what is the problem that you're faced with in that first episode?
So the first episode, do you remember back in the Next Generation, there was, I don't remember the name of the episode, but these officers were infected with a parasite that was controlling them, and they were all linked to one queen parasite. Does that ring a bell?
Maybe.
So that was the premise of this episode is, well, we got called to go investigate a ship, and when we get there, I'm like really summarizing right now, we find these Romulans that seem to have killed everybody on the station, but as we take them down, we notice these parasites just burst out of them, which causes all kinds of confusion after that.
Yeah, so these are the insects, and there's that. If it's the episode I'm thinking of, it's the one where the mother queen sort of bursts out of this guy's body.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
I think a lot of people will never forget when they were playing with the mealworms in the dish. That was really gross.
Exactly right. So as we are recording here, this is an audio podcast, but people can't see the video, but I'm going to just note that you have a lot of fandom stuff in your background back there. I see a bunch of different things. So have you been compelled to buy anything Star Trek related, any merchandise?
Yes, I have. I'm just waiting for the right time. I like the Funko Pop figures, but as a rule for myself, I never buy them for myself because then I'll want to get the entire set. So I always heavily hint it to people like, hey, this is really cute. I would really like this, I'm going to add it to my wish list, but I will never buy those things for myself because then I'm going to have to collect all of them, and I don't have enough space for that.
So this sounds like something you got to talk to the boyfriend about, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, I'm sure the answer is no, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Have you been to a Star Trek convention?
No, not specifically for Star Trek.
So you've been to a sci-fi convention then?
I've been to video game conventions. I've been to New York Comic Con, and I've been to some anime conventions.
And what did you think of that experience?
I love it. I love seeing people, expressing their fandoms, expressing what they're there to see, and even just people that have no idea what to expect, just walking around, taking pictures with people. I love that. I love when people can express the things that make them happiest.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little not so secret, which is not secret at all, in fact, but they're having and have announced actually that the official Star Trek conventions will be rotating around the country. So the next one will be in Chicago next year. And then the year after that, who knows, might be coming to your neck of the woods, which would be a great thing.
It's once a year and they're just going to change locations?
Yeah, it's looking like that as we record this in April 2021. So they've announced the first one for Chicago for March or April next year, I forget.
Okay.
But they did say that after that, it'll be going to different parts of the country. So
that's really cool.
Maybe at some point it'll be back there and it'll be back in New York. I know they did have one that was called Mission New York. That was about, 3-4 years ago. As we record this, they had one, I think it was at Javits Center. So it may come back. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep an eye on that because I'm actually moving to California. So if it's not in New York, maybe it'll be on the West Coast.
Well, if you're moving out to the West Coast, then you should check out the one that's in Vegas in August. So it's not the official convention, but they're having a Star Trek convention every August here in Las Vegas, which is pretty easy from California. And so that's definitely something to check out if you're interested. So, okay, great. Well, I think we should just jump right in and talk about some episodes, Alex. Are you game?
Let's go.
All right, so let's start with some TOS. Let's talk about Journey to Babel. So this is the one where we get to meet Spock's family. We have the wonderful Mark Leonard as Sarek and Jane Wyatt as Amanda, as his parents, which of course he doesn't really want to talk about. And there's all this sort of parent-child angst going on in the episode. Plus we have this whole subplot of a spy or something going on there. So what is it about this episode that made it come to the top of the list for you, Alex?
So Spock is my favorite character, and I love any original series episode that focuses on him or his life and his past. So to meet his mother and father, that really threw me for a loop. I knew he was half Vulcan, half human, but I didn't think they were ever going to actually introduce that in the show. So that was really exciting to see that. It was interesting to see the struggling relationship he had with his father. And obviously he's on good terms with his mother, but she's upset that they don't have a good bond because of the direction that Spock chose to take his career.
What is it about Spock in particular that appealed to you?
Just the underlying Vulcan sarcasm, where they're not supposed to be aggressive. They're not supposed to be hostile, or they're just supposed to be just logical with people. I really like that about him, and everyone, all Vulcans, I like that. And he's just so smart. I mean, Leonard, he did such a good character, such a good job bringing that character to life, and that really stuck with me.
As you watch the episode, there's this whole plot about Sarek needing the blood transfusion and Spock refusing to give it to him because he felt like he had duty to the ship, and he had duty to command. Where did you come down on sort of the ethical side of that? Do you feel that Spock was in the right to take that position, or he was being obstinate, or what?
I definitely think he made the right logical decision. Logically, it did make sense. He's the first officer. When the captain's unavailable, he has to be there to lead. And whoever is after him, I think it was Chekhov, he would be after Spock. He's not as experienced. He doesn't have the same ability to be able to lead like Spock could. So Spock had to make a decision. Do I allow somebody else to take over when we're being attacked, we're being followed, there's somebody on the ship that's not supposed to be, or do I save my father? And one of the things that has always stayed with him is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And that's the decision that he made. So I do agree with him on that point, but I think if it was any other species that didn't take logic over emotion, they definitely would have said, no, let somebody else take over right now. I have a duty to my family.
One of the things I think that's interesting about Star Trek is that many times they say things like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, but then they sort of twist it around in another episode. So there's a Voyager episode that we could talk about here, which I'm not going to because I don't want to spoil it for you. But you can contrast it against an episode like Measure of a Man from TNG, where the things that Maddox is arguing about is the needs of the many. He's saying, think about what it would mean for Starfleet if we could replicate data at scale, right? And we could have like a whole ton of datas. Think about what it would mean if we had this technology more widely available and we could replicate it, and what that would enable us to do and how wonderful that would be. And the whole point in that episode is no, he has individual rights. Data does, and we can't do that. So Star Trek loves to show us, I think, both sides of the argument. But let me ask you about that episode, since I chose to bring it up, Measure of a Man. That also made the list, and I'd love to hear your particular perspective on it.
Yeah, so Data is up there on my top favorite characters. I just love characters that are just kind of socially awkward and trying to fit in any way they can, and people are trying to work with them on that. So I got upset at that episode that it was even a question. Is Data sentient? Does he have rights? Because of course he has rights. Why did you let him get this far in Starfleet if he didn't have rights? If he wasn't his own person, you wouldn't put a vacuum cleaner as your as one of those senior officers. So this episode was very profound for me in how they structured it in a court system. to essentially determine if he's Starfleet property, if he's sentient, if he has rights.
Yeah, it's weird that it got this long before someone brought this up, right? You figure they would have adjudicated all this when he was like applying to Starfleet Academy.
Exactly.
Well, you must have loved it then in Lower Decks when they had a peanut hamper made it through the Academy, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's stick with TNG for a minute. Let's talk about Deja Q. So this is the one, of course, where Q gets kicked out of the Q continuum and seeks help and refuge on board the Enterprise. And they are somewhat, let's just say, skeptical of the whole story.
Yeah.
So what's going on here with this one, Alex?
Okay, so Q, he's one of those characters that I hate, but I also love him, but I also hate him in the end because he's so annoying. And this episode, it was so satisfying to see him be helpless and to see him be unable to do everything he's been able to do for hundreds, thousands of years, however old he is. Just to see him kind of suffer in some way to finally get a taste of his own medicine, it was very satisfying to watch. I don't hate him, but I really enjoyed watching him struggle.
I mean, the actor is fantastic in the role.
Yes, he is.
Right? I mean, you can't deny that John Delancey is really amazing. Now, have you heard the news?
Which news?
The news that they've announced that he will be returning in season 2 of the Picard show.
No, I have not, actually. I don't know anything about the Picard show. I haven't looked into that at all.
I would not recommend you watch it just yet.
Okay.
Because it has characters that were in Star Trek Voyager appear in it.
Okay.
So, you're going at a pretty good clip. So I feel like it's okay to tell you this. Go ahead and watch Voyager and finish up Voyager. Then if you want to launch in a Picard, do that. Because you have both TNG characters and Voyager characters in it. So
okay.
I think, and I think that will be probably the best way to go for you. But yeah, certainly a really fantastic episode. Now, you've got one on the list here, Alex, that I think is very interesting because it's an unusual choice. I don't think we've talked much about this episode before, which always makes me excited, and that's This Side of Paradise, TOS, certainly the one that's memorable for Spock hanging from a tree. So tell me about what's going on here and why it was an episode that was special to you.
All right, so with a lot of Star Trek episodes, I like when there's chaos going on, not just, okay, this is a mission, we're going to be serious about this. I like when things just go totally out of control, which is what happened in this episode, where everybody gets infected by these spores and they're not listening to the captain and they want to stay. And he's just getting so frustrated, he doesn't know what to do. And I just thought this whole episode was hysterical, especially seeing Spock in this light under all of this euphoria and happiness it was just great. It was fantastic.
The one thing I remember is the fact that he was actually happy. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things we were talking about before we began recording is one of the things I love about interviewing people like yourself is that new fans are unaware of some of these debates that go on in the fandom and some of these old chestnuts that we've been arguing about for 15, 25, 55 years. And one of those is this idea that the Federation is a utopia in some ways. And I am going to be honest with you, I don't actually believe that. I believe that that's something that fans and people affiliated with the show have said about the show. But when you look at what's on the screen, I don't think it's necessarily the case. So, but what I do find interesting is that the message of especially TOS is anti-utopian. And this is an example of that because they're like living this wonderful life, this wonderful spore-assisted lifestyle on the planet. And Kirk is like, no, you can't have that. Spock, you're happy for the first time in your life? No, we're not doing that, And actually gets him angry and sort of ruins the whole thing so that they get back on the ship and go on their way. So it's just an episode that jumps out at me for that particular reason, and that's one of the reasons I like it because I think it's kind of perverse in its own way, sort of anti this idea that other people have talked about. So another set of episodes, we're going to do a threefer, and it's a very popular threefer. It's come up on the show before, and that's the Enterprise Vulcan trilogy from season 4, The Forge, Awakening, and Kirshara. Certainly a collection of episodes that I think a lot of fans are very familiar with. So I have to know what's going on here. Is it because of your love of Mr. Spock and the Vulcans, or was there something else going on?
Yes, it was that. But before we talk about that, I just want to say after these episodes, we figured out these are the ones we want to talk about. I listened to the last new person that you had on, maybe a week and a half after I reached out to you, and I got so upset. I said, this guy, he's a new Trek fan. He's watched all of Star Trek, and he picked the 3 episodes I wanted to talk about too.
Oh, you're angry at Jimmy?
Yes. Out of all 800, 900 hours of Star Trek, you just happened to pick the ones I want to talk about too.
See, this is the reason that I shuffle the episode order all the time. We were talking about this before we recorded, right? That's one of the things I said is like, if you want to talk about episodes that, I just released one where the guy's talking about those episodes, I'm not going to release yours next. I'm going to put it at the back of the line, right? And it can marinate on my hard drive for a little bit until it's, ready for release to the world. So
I was thinking of emailing you and saying, oh, actually, I want to change this, but no, these, I really enjoyed these, so I do want to talk about them.
Oh, well, then we should talk about them. So tell me what's going on. Why are they so awesome?
Well, for season 4 of Enterprise, I noticed they took a different turn in how they were doing their episodes, and they were doing arcs, which I think is great. Instead of trying to cram so much information into one episode, they can really explore topics at hand over an hour and a half to 2 hours of content. So when this was a whole arc about Vulcans, I was ecstatic because I love Vulcans, and I wasn't getting enough of them in the Next Generation. And seeing how kind of polluted the Vulcans used to be kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I'm just like, man, I thought these guys had it, right from the beginning, that they didn't have these problems that you would see in humanity with corruption and everything in their government. So it was really interesting to see how Archer and T'Pol needed to figure out what was going on with the bombing of this embassy and finding out some truths along the way.
So, I'm doing a rewatch of Enterprise, and I live tweet the episodes. So if anybody here is on Twitter, and if you're listening to this and you want to follow my occasional live tweeting of episodes, go find me there at TrekProfiles. But one of the things I just cannot take are the Vulcans early on in Enterprise, especially. Like, just calm down, space bro. Just calm down. They are just so agitating. And it's really something, to just... I just have such a short tolerance for how they are at the beginning of the show. It gets better, but wow, it's. I'm glad they got that all sorted out by season 4 for sure. Now, did you like the symmetry of having T'Pau, young T'Pau, in the episode here, and then we get to see her as an old lady in Amok time?
That was really interesting to see. I didn't know that they were going to just start throwing in older characters, because I know Enterprise is the prequel to everything, and they really did a good job in bringing in these characters that are going to exist after the show and incorporate them into that time era. So that was really interesting to see.
I'm always a little skeptical of that because I always feel like it's a little too much small universe syndrome. That like they run across a Vulcan. So, of course, it's a Vulcan that we already know. They go into space and they meet, some alien race, but it's like the alien race we already know from that other episode, right? And you think, time for something new.
A little more diversity would be nice, but I do appreciate how they kind of fill in some blanks, like with I forget the name of the episode. I think it was in season 4 of Enterprise as well, where they kind of explain how Klingons from the original series don't have the same features as the Klingons that we see in the Next Generation.
Right, Affliction, I think was the name of that episode.
Yeah, they tied that in really well, because that was kind of like a loose end. You're watching the original series and you're like, these don't look like Klingons at all. Compared to what they're represented in all of the newer shows. So that was really nice to see.
Yeah, there's I hate to call it a controversy, but let's just say there's a hubbub because they redesigned the Klingons for Star Trek Discovery.
Okay.
And they're very different, and you can make your own decision on the aesthetics of it, but they are certainly different. When you look at, say, how they did the Klingons, I don't know if you've seen the 2009 films that they made, what we call the Kelvinverse films. I don't know if you've seen those.
I have seen the first one. I don't remember anything about it.
Well, they had Klingons at one point, and they were very much redone, but they were similar to the Klingons that we were sort of used to from TNG, but just sort of done up a little bit differently and, sort of amped up. And you could see that there was a through line. What they did in Discovery was actually very different. And it caused a lot of people to get wrapped around the axle. Let's just say that. But I'll leave it for you, and you can make your own determination about it. So you got that to look forward to.
Okay.
And if you stay in the fandom, it'll become a thing you can argue with other Star Trek fans about. So you got that to look forward to. How fun is that? So out of the Forge, Awakening, and Kirshara, which of those three is your favorite?
The last one, Kirshara, because it kind of wraps everything up, and they just give you so much information about what Vulcan used to be like before, what's his name?
Surak.
Yes, before Surak kind of came along and essentially stopped Vulcans from destroying themselves. So that was really interesting. And you get to see the harsh world of Vulcan itself. You get to see how the government is actually willing to sacrifice its people just to hide the truth. And I really enjoyed seeing how at that point, pretty much Vulcan was going to start changing for the better. They finally got the Kirshara. They're going to learn what Sarek actually wanted to teach. And you see it from T'Pol, how engrossed she got in learning everything that she thought was right and now is wrong.
Very good. Now, I notice another one on the list here, which is a little bit different from some of the other ones we've talked about, and that's the TOS movie Voyage Home, or as we like to call it, the one with the whales.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly a little bit different from these sort of more serious episodes that you've picked. So I have to ask you what's going on here with this one, Alex. Is it just a moment of fun or what's going on?
Absolutely. This movie was fun from beginning to end. I had to pause at some points and say, did this really just happen? Did I just witness this man? Did I just witness Spock jump into a pool and go swimming with whales to mind meld with them? I had to rewind to make sure I saw that correctly. Like I said, I really like chaotic episodes. I like chaos, which is why Lower Decks is I really enjoyed that. And to see all of these shenanigans happening in this movie just made me so happy.
It had a lot of humor too. And so one of the critiques that sometimes people throw around, about different versions of Star Trek is they're like, oh, they don't take it seriously, And I think, have you been watching Star Trek? I mean, like right from the beginning, right? From the Trouble with Tribbles to Piece of the Action to even the TOS movies, there was always a lot of humor built into the show, and it's just part of how they do things. And I think it's an essential part of Star Trek.
Absolutely,
I couldn't do without it.
Can't be serious all the time because that's only going to attract one kind of audience, an audience who only wants serious content versus an audience that might want diverse content. They want to see humor, they want to see drama, they want to see maybe a little bit of horror. So you have to be able to attract people from all aspects. At least that's how I see it.
I think that's quite right. I think actually that strategy is part of what Paramount Plus is doing with all the Star Trek shows that they're currently making right now, in that they want them all to be sort of a kind, in that they have sort of a Star Trek flavor, however you define that, but they're all doing very different things. I mean, Discovery is really an action adventure show. It's basically a Marvel movie that's sort of set in the Star Trek universe. And then you have Picard, which is more of a character study. You've got Lower Decks, which is like zany comedy. So they're sort of making Star Trek for every purpose, for every kind of thing that you might want out of Star Trek. So you might find something to watch, even if you don't like all the shows. There might be something that appeals to you. At least as far as I can figure out, that appears to be the strategy. So we'll see. I'm kind of enjoying all of it to more of a less degree.
It's definitely working because I've got people into Lower Decks. They've never watched anything of Star Trek before, and now they're actually interested in starting the show so they can see what this universe is actually all about.
And so you're recommending that Lower Decks is their gateway in?
Yes, 100%.
Wow. Okay. So that's pretty wild. Yeah. You go watch Lower Decks and then you go turn on TOS for the first time. What would that even be like? I can't even imagine like what that experience would be. It has to be interesting, but you should definitely talk about that and share that when that happens and let me know what people say when they sort of start with Lower Decks, which I think is a couple standard deviations away from what I would call typical Star Trek. And that's not a criticism. It's I enjoy it, Lower Decks, but it's just very different.
Yeah.
From what you get on the show. So one thing I will say about Lower Decks is that Mariner is horrible.
I know, but that's what makes her so great.
She's so horrible. I was just watching that episode the other day where they've got the visiting captain, the Tellarite captain, who's, they're all sitting in the briefing room and she's like yawning out loud and basically is like, I don't care about any of this. And I was like, you know what? If I was in like a thing at work and someone was like, I'm in this meeting, but I don't care about this and I don't care about what's happening, I'd be like, get this person out. You know,
That was
like,
when she got promoted, right?
yeah.
She was doing that on purpose because she really did not want to be there. She was just trying to get demoted at that point.
Wow, I just kept thinking she's horrible. She's really horrible. But I enjoy watching it, and I look forward to seeing what they do with the character in the next season. So we'll see. We know we have 2 more seasons on the way. Season 2 is already scheduled to come out this year. We don't know exactly when.
I think August. I think they said it was going to come out in August.
And we already have season 3 is ordered, I've heard. So season 3 is already going to happen. We just don't know when. So I think that's wonderful. So we'll have lots more Lower Decks to figure out what actually happens with Mariner. So, Alex, I have to ask you some really important questions here, which is you're a new fan. December 2020 was the date you put on it. I didn't select that. You did. And said that's when you decided to become a Star Trek fan. So we're only 5 or 6 months into your Star Trek fandom, such as it is. And yet you've decided to spend a couple hours talking to some rando weirdo on the internet about it. This whole thing was predicated on you actually posting in a Star Trek forum that, hey, I've now coming out to the world as a Star Trek fan, and I want to declare publicly that I'm this person, and I align myself with this fandom, which is sort of an unusual thing. It's one thing to just sort of watch the show and decide you're a fan, but it's another thing to sort of make a splash by going on social media and websites and things and just saying publicly, I'm a Star Trek fan. So what possessed you to, first of all, go out there and actually announce to the world that you were a Star Trek fan, which is, of course, how I found you?
Well, sometimes I don't go on Reddit that often, but sometimes I do. If there's something that means a lot to me, like whether it's something related to culinary or a fandom, I'll make a post about it because I feel I want to vent and get it out there and see if anybody has anything constructive to say about it. So I really found out that I was a fan. I started watching in mid-November, but I didn't really commit to being a fan until December because that's when I found myself adding a car decal to my wish list on Etsy. A live long and prosper decal, and that's when I said, okay, yeah, I'm invested now.
If you're going to put a Star Trek decal on your car, you're in it, sister. Let me tell you.
Yeah, so that's why I picked December. Even though I started watching in November, December is when I realized that's it. There's no going back.
And so that's let's see. When was that Reddit post? I have to think now. I didn't look. I didn't check it exactly, but it had to have been shortly after that.
Yes, it definitely was. It was. I don't know if it was the end of November or beginning of December.
Okay, sometime around there. How would you characterize the reception that you got from the people who responded to your post?
Oh, it was very welcoming. Everyone was like, oh, congratulations, welcome. You have so much in store for you ahead. And that made that kind of hyped me up too, to see that this is a very welcoming community, whereas some other fandoms, people are not as nice, but I feel the Star Trek community is different in that regard, and they're very welcoming. Of course, they can be very argumentative with each other, but they're not going to try. They're not going to try to chase people away that want to get involved in it, because of course they're probably going to want to convince them that their side is right, but they're going to be very welcoming about it.
Why does Star Trek matter to you?
I really enjoy sci-fi fantasy. Like I said, I was a Star Wars person growing up. I could probably recite all of the movies from heart while watching it. And that was what me and my mom would do. So to be able to jump into another sci-fi universe that's very developed, that has such a nice backing behind it, it's nice. It's kind of nostalgic to when I first started watching Star Wars or first started watching Lord of the Rings, to get really engrossed in something and to really like it. So it's like I haven't felt this way about a fandom in quite a long time. Like Game of Thrones was probably one of them that I felt very involved in, but I've watched a lot of shows and I just don't feel the same connection like I do with Star Trek.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation, Alexandria, I have to tell you, but the M5 is signaling me that it is time for the Kobayashi Maru. The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5, just for you. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready, Alex?
I am.
All right. M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Alex's responses.
Simulation loaded.
You're on the classic TOS Enterprise. Choose your hangout spot, the botany lab or the astronomy lab.
Astronomy lab.
Which starbase is best, 3 or 4?
3.
Michelob beer or Saurian brandy?
Saurian brandy.
Which aliens are worse, the Metrons or the Vians?
The Vians.
Who shall feel your wrath, Vulcan Logic Extremists or the Zindi?
Vulcan Logic Extremists.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing.
Alex, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our show. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Alex is awarded the title of Port Nacelle Watch Officer.
Okay. Great.
So congratulations. Alex, please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation or follow your exploits in Star Trek adventures.
I'm not really on social media and on publicly like that, but if anybody wanted to talk to me on Instagram, they could add me at Amira1295. Facebook, you could search my name, Alexandria Elnadouri, and you can get in touch with me that way.
Alex, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you for having me.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your useful suggestions, your pent-up epistles of provocation, or selfies of yourself in a Spock helmet to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send me might be used in the show, or it might be left behind on a planet, just like Janeway's lizard babies. This time, I leave you with a quote from Dr. Nichols, who in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home gave us that immensely unforgettable line, "Not now, Madeline." Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper. It must have been kind of weird, huh? You get a message like, hey, you want to talk about Star Trek?
I know. At first, I didn't think it was real. I'm like, what is this, spam? What is this?
I am many things, but I am not a tasty Hawaiian meat treat. So, yeah, so I've been doing a lot of the people that have been on my show have been what I would consider lifers. You know, people who are like, there's not a time in my life I wasn't a Star Trek fan. So I've really been enjoying having on some newer fans and talking to them about their experiences. It's been just really great. Yeah,
I've enjoyed listening to their stories as well. I've listened to, I think, all of them, all of the new people at least. And it's interesting as we share a lot of the same experiences and expectations of things just from watching and continuing through the seasons.
Oh, cool. Well, I will look forward to hearing all about that. That's cool. So, yeah, it's this is probably, I think, like the fourth one I've done of these. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool from my perspective is that there's a lot of things that float around in the Star Trek fandom. And the newer fans in particular don't know what those things are. And so, like, your point of view is very fresh. Because, there's things that fans have been talking about and debating for like 25, 55 years now. And, those things maybe you don't have access to. So when you come in, the things that y'all key off of are usually very different. So that's pretty cool. Plus, small footnote, you're my first guest, I believe, from New York City, which is really awesome. Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah, that's pretty good. I'm New York City, too, born and raised. So.
Oh, nice. Where?
Yeah. South Queens, Howard Beach.
Okay, I'm from Staten Island.
Oh, okay. Yep. So I was, it's funny. I had to fly for work right into JFK, and I had to pick up a rental car and drive it out to Long Island. And the guy says to me at the rental car counter, he says, where are you from? I'm like, well, actually about 3 miles that way. Okay. Now, pronounce your full name for me. I have Alexandria Elnadouri. Did I do that right?
Yeah, perfect.
Right.
You're in like the top 5 percentile there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I noticed you had that I there at the end, so I didn't give you Alexandra, which I'm sure was my initial inclination on how to type it, but I did not do that. Do you know why Michelob beer got in there?
No, I don't.
It's from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
Oh.
So remember they go to the pizza place? Admiral Kirk goes out with, what's her name? Dr. Taylor. Mm-hmm. And they go out to the Italian place. And she orders, like, he doesn't know what to order, and so she orders pizza and Michelob.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's drinking the beer and he's looking at it like he doesn't know what it is. So that was my little reference there.
No, completely slipped my mind there.
Yeah. Now the Vulcan logic extremists, they're from Discovery. So you'll get the chance to experience that when you get into Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, but do you remember the Metrons and the Vians?
No, not at all. Them? Not at all.
So, yeah, they're both from TOS. You remember the one where Kirk has to fight the Gorn captain, the big lizard guy in the lizard suit?
Yes.
That was the Metrons.
Okay.
So he's like, yeah, you guys are gonna fight, right? And that's who, and we're gonna destroy the loser ship. That was the Metrons who did that. And then there was the TOS episode where they had the empath. It was all like with the black set in the background, and they had the actress who didn't speak, and those aliens were torturing her, right?
Do you remember with the big heads?
Yes, and they were deciding whether or not they were going to save her species.
Yeah.
Right, and so she had to prove herself worthy of sacrifice, and then they were like, "Yeah, we're going to save you because you chose to do that." Those were the Vians. They're kind of jerks, to be honest with you, but so are the Metrons too. You know, so yeah, there's no right answers to any of this, so it doesn't matter. Okay, boom diggity, we're done.
Awesome.
Is that okay for you?
Yeah, it was great.
All right, good. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I really enjoy these interviews with the new fans because it's interesting the stuff that you key off of, you know, without having all that background in the fandom and all that stuff. Mm-hmm.
I know, because from the other episodes that I listened to, I really enjoy listening to all of these lifers, and it's very interesting how deep they get into analyzing these episodes, which I might get into when I start rewatching some seasons. I could come back with a fresh mind and reevaluate the episode. Like I have done that with there's been a few episodes that I've rewatched and I've come up with different opinions since then. And that's definitely going to be me after I finish watching everything. When I rewatch something, I'm gonna start reanalyzing my original stance on things.
Give me an example of an episode you've reconsidered.
Well, Deja Q, actually, for example. My first time watching that, I was just ecstatic that this guy was miserable. But my second time watching it through, I realized, you know what? This is kind of hard for him. He kind of deserves what's happening to him, but I shouldn't be taking such pleasure in seeing somebody suffer like this.
So you mellowed a little bit on Q, huh?
Yeah, and everybody keeps telling me that I'm going to actually really enjoy him once I watch more of TNG and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, he keeps coming back. And he's even in Lower Decks very briefly at one point, if you remember. And they're just like, Q, we don't have time for you.
Yeah.
Whatever your shenanigans are, we have no time for this.
I know, and people in my D&D group, they tell me that there's other people like him, different letters, and I'm just like, oh, we're going to get the whole alphabet of these obnoxious people in the Star Trek universe?
No, I don't know I mean, there's other Q. I mean, they're all Q. Right. I mean,
they said they use another letter to represent somebody.
Do they?
That's what they maybe they're wrong, but that just threw me for a loop. I'm like, oh great, we're gonna have more of him.
That could be. I don't, off the top of my head, recollect that. I'm sure people listening to this will let me know. They'll tweet at me and tell me because I get those corrections when I can't remember things on the show. So maybe I'll look it up, and sometimes I have errata at the front. Like the episode I just released, I realized I screwed up a thing in the middle of the interview, and I said, "Oh, at this point, that other thing happened," and then I realized it was the other way, and I was like, I knew people were going to tweet at me or something, email me, so I had to get in there and correct it. But, I one of the things I've learned, Alex, from doing this show is that it also depends, too, at the time that you are in your life. Is as you get older, sometimes these episodes land for you differently. And the example I use for that is The Offspring, like where Data creates his daughter.
Yeah, that was a sad episode.
Yeah, it's a little different when you watch it and you're a parent. It's all I can say.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so there's a couple like that, and I think also true that as you have different life experiences, sometimes things just happen to you that then you see something in an episode that you connect with because it's something happened to you, you know?
Yeah, that happened in an ENT episode, The Cogenitor. I don't know if that was the name of the episode, but it had to do with that alien species that had a third sex for reproduction. And that episode kind of hit hard for me because in the end, that I don't know what they named themselves after Trip. They killed themselves because they didn't want to go back to living that kind of life. And when you see people struggling with depression, when you see people struggling with any kind of mental illness and how maybe they've already tried to take their life, that definitely hit me harder than it may have for people who have never had to deal with that in their life.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I've heard some pretty amazing stories, and that's one of the very fortunate things about doing this show is that people will tell me stuff that is very touching and how this pop culture phenomenon called Star Trek, right? Which, when people were making it, they were just trying to make a show. And it's had this tremendous effect on people's lives that is hard to quantify. And, it goes beyond ratings or popularity, but it's really infused itself into the culture and touched people that are having particular struggles and identifying with these characters and just really embracing this show in a way that's just wild. Have you ever seen Galaxy Quest?
Yeah, I love that. I've watched that when I was a child, and I love that movie, and I love it even more now that I realize it was a spoof on Star Trek.
It's not a spoof; it's a love letter.
Yeah,
it's a love letter. It really is.
I went back and watched it, I think, last month, and it was just like watching it for the first time all over again, with with a fresh mind going into it, knowing why this movie was actually made now.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, cool.